bring the Board of Adjustment meeting into effect, and if we'll stop and do the pledge to the flag. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Want to do the roll call?
Member Small?
Present.
Member Lawson?
Here.
Member Chase?
Here.
Vice Chair Bomar?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Oh, we did that out of order. If anybody has any comments,
So if we could,
first we'll do the swearing in.
real quick, Vice Chair, because the approval of the agenda, we actually do have some additions and changes this morning, or this afternoon before the motion. So number one, we're going to be adding, and we passed it out, the meeting calendar. So this will be an item for discussion 5B on the upcoming meetings for the Board of Adjustment. And then based on the applicant's request, item 4A, case number 23014, Alhambra Street, is continued indefinitely. We don't know when. There may need to be some amendments. They're obviously not here, so that's really it. So there'll only be one case today. So if we can get a motion by the board to approve the agenda based on the request I just made, and then a second and a roll call, then we can start with audience comments.
Great. I'll move to approve the agenda as amended with adding 5B to look at the
I second that.
upcoming meetings and then continuance to 23014.
I'll second it.
Member Chase?
Yes.
Member Lawson?
Yes.
Member Small?
Yes.
Vice Chair Bomar?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. So now we'll have audience comments. Anybody who has any comments they'd like to make that's not regarding a case today, they can come up to the podium. If it's regarding a case, and you'll have time to speak at that.
It's regarding a case, but it's rescheduled, so, I forgot that changed. My name is Betty Reznicki. I live in the Don Cesar neighborhood. I'm also president of the Don Cesar Associations Corporation. So I'm coming in behalf of several residents who have contacted me. Even though it's in reference to the case, it's not just about the case. It's just in general. Upon receiving comments and calls, emails from some residents, I went upon and I looked at the case and I saw what was being proposed on this variance. My question to you all, and to the city as well, is that when reports are being made and it's talking on behalf of a neighborhood, I would strongly suggest that the neighborhood be called or contacted, because when the reports say that it meets the character of the neighborhood, maybe the neighborhood should be asked, what is the character of the neighborhood? This particular neighborhood, which I'm not sure if the whole city remembers, is currently under a survey to get historic designation. So we're going through this big process. And for the proposed home that was going to come before you, definitely does not meet the character of the neighborhood. Again, just asking that when notes are being made on reports of that nature, because it's going to come to the board, that just know the neighborhood was not asked. It is pretty substantial what's being asked, and none of the documents that were submitted for this particular variance had even a picture of a rendering of what it could look like. If you don't know, next to 1 Alhambra is the historic home of Thomas Rowe, the architect for the Don Cesar Hotel, literally right next to it. On the opposite side of that house, which used to be, I'll call it an empty lot, there was a cottage there that was built out. It looks like, and I hate to say this, but an office building. And it's towering over this historic home, which is historic. And the proposed home would be towering on the opposite side of this historic home, which literally would be, if you ever saw the movie Up or any of those commercials where the little home is in the middle, sandwiched in between, literally that's what would be happening. There's 7 feet on one side of the house to the current Thomas Row house, the Alhambra home, and they're requesting substantially another 7 feet on the opposite side, okay, which tells you, you know, you could pass more than coffee out, you know, across through the windows, except that that poor home is gonna have zero light because it's gonna be darkened. So, you know, in the futures, you know, when you're thinking about character, what it would look like, really consider the homes around it, because it does not meet the character of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael Welch. I live at 3410 East Basin, across from the house that Betty was just speaking of, that they built without anybody in the neighborhood knowing about it.
Just
And-
respectfully, I just want to make sure these comments are general, because the applicant's not here to address any
No,
of them.
this is not. I'm not addressing the house that
Okay.
was taken off the agenda, but a house across from me on Basin, which I'm addressing the problem of not knowing what is going on in our neighborhood from the city. When an application is made, especially for a variance like this, I got a notice because I'm within 300 feet. I'm right across the street from this thing that looks like 3 entry-level Brooklyn townhouses on East Basin and is totally out of character with the neighborhood. Nobody showed anybody any plans. Nobody spoke about it. It was a fait accompli before we knew what was going on. So I just want to concur with Betty that it would be very good for all of us if everybody knew what was going on the beach, particularly the neighbors. And we have a very cohesive neighborhood organization, as you probably know, and we can handle things like this in a nice, diplomatic, neighborly way. It's easily done. Nobody has reached out to anybody, as far as I know, on any of these matters. So if you would take that into consideration, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to swear in anybody who has any comments to make regarding the cases today. So if you would stand up and we'll swear you in.
Anyone who will be speaking to the board or making a presentation needs to be sworn in. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the information or factual representation that you are about to give or present to the board is truthful?
Yes.
Are there any hard copies or anything of what the cases are?
There's agendas on the table back there.
So we've already approved the agenda and had the comments.
So now we're going to approve the minutes from July 26th.
Right, okay. So anybody want to make a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes from the last board meeting.
I'll second the motion.
Roll call.
Member Lawson?
Yes.
Member Small?
Yes.
Member Chase? Yes. Vice Chair Bomar?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. We're going to go directly to 4B, which is case number 23062.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair and members of the board. Kristen Coleman, Senior Planner for the city. Our first application and our only one due to the changes in the agenda is variance case number 23062. The applicant and owner is George Francis and Loretta McGrath, and they're located at 6490 Bay Street. The applicants are requesting a practical difficulty variance to construct a 16.5 by 16.5 foot, which is approximately 280 square foot, 12 foot high, or by 12 foot, 11.5 inches high patio cover that does not meet the required minimum side yard setback of 7 feet with 6 feet 2 inches proposed, and the required minimum rear yard setback of 15 feet with 14 feet 2 inches proposed. Listing of exhibits. Here is an aerial of the property. The property is highlighted in the red outline. It is located on Bay Street, and it currently contains a single-family residential use. It is an interior parcel surrounded by single-family uses to the north, south, and east, and a residential duplex to the west. On the zoning map, the property is located in the RU1 zone and RU on the future land use map. The site contains a one-story single-family residence. It was constructed in 1959, according to the Pinellas County property appraiser, with a driveway, rear patio area with a recently constructed in-ground pool. And this is just a little bit of enlargement of the request, so you can zoom in a little bit. The applicant graciously provided us the required setbacks in the colors and then what was proposed, so you could see. Just a little bit more on the variance request detail, and the chart was contained within the staff findings report. So with this one, we have a little bit of a difference. In February 2023, the applicant did submit plans for construction of a 12-foot by 20-foot patio cover that was approved actually by zoning. A little timeline, the submission of the application and supplemental documents to construct a 12 by 20 patio cover on February 13th. It was approved by zoning on its first review. On the 23rd of February, it was denied by building due to missing items. And then in July 6th, there was a resubmittal with the amended dimensions of 16.5 by 16.5. On the 7th, it was denied by zoning not due to meeting not required setbacks. And then on the 20th of July, the practical difficulty variance package was then submitted, just to give you a little background history. So let's go on to the site. The noticing was completed as required, and the sign was posted on September 19th. Here's a front of the existing dwelling. So you do have a single-family residence to the south and another single-family residence to the north, just so you can see the adjacent neighbors. Just going back from the street, that behind that fence is the side of the property where the proposed patio cover would be located. Going on to the property where we see the debris on that side of the pool, that is where the proposed cover is to be located. Just some more angles of the rear yard so you can see the current layout of the pool and the patio. Just a little version from looking from the west to the east. I'm just looking more to the rear yard. And then, of course, you have to have the opposite view as well, looking from the southwest corner. The conditions for meeting the practical difficulty variance contained within the Land Development Code. So the criteria and comments were addressed in the staff findings report. The staff comments is that the applicant should be prepared to provide their own testimony and respond to the staff comments below. The applicant should provide history of the property, including the recently constructed in-ground pool and paver patio, including the desired patio cover. And testimony should be provided as to the necessity of the proposed patio cover and the change in dimensions, increase of square footage, and if alternate locations were contemplated. Staff finds the proposed variance relief sought does not advance the purposes of the Land Development Code, Section 1.1, and finds the benefit of granting the variances from the applicable sections of Section 6.3 of the Land Development Code will impair the intent and purpose of the zoning code, and other feasible methods exist that would not require variance relief. So with that, staff does recommend denial of case number 23062 as proposed.
Thank you. Would the applicants like to come forward and?
Yes. I had printed out some documentation, but I apologize. I did it right before I got here, and I printed everything you already have. So I have one copy, which was this one. I could share this with anybody who would like it, but I only have one copy. But this is just some additional photos. Oh, yeah, this makes this easy then.
Do you mind stating your name and address?
Oh, yes. George Francis, 6490 Bay Street.
Thank you. There is an overhead that we can utilize for pictures.
Yeah, great. All right, perfect. So this aligns much with Kristen's timeline. It was rejected for basically the engineering, floodplain and wind, right? Didn't have the required. It was a off-the-shelf 12 by 20. Matter of fact, this went back further. It went back almost a year, and it was the official, permit, submission was in February, but it went further back because initially it was 12 by 24, and then it went to 12 by 20 because it was an available off-the-shelf from Costco type of structure. That's when I learned a lot, and found out that that was not okay. And you'll see pictures, we modeled it, and you'll also see that it also caused, it's close to the house, but it also caused like a tripping hazard. It wasn't safe. Obviously, if the wind came, it'd probably tear it off and it wouldn't work. So that's where, the journey continued. And we went down the path of reaching out to planning. And I think it was Brandon. And, he recommended the admin variance. So we went down and did the administrative variance. I submitted it, of course, to the permit, which then I was told that's not where you submit it. You go and, get it to Kristen. So got it to Kristen. So Kristen and I met along the timeline and described the situation and how over the next number of months, we determined that the 16 by 16 is, going to have the right engineering. It'll, be more aesthetically pleasing and appreciate the property. It won't be offset and look a little weird because it was kind of, from a feng shui, it wasn't, it wouldn't have gone with the flow of the yard, right? It just looked very odd. And you'll see a picture of that from the modeled one. But so that's kind of what started it. What I realized was, that's why I printed it last night, is that when we switched from the admin variance to the practical difficulty, and I had to rewrite the forms and resubmit, it was, based on the recommendations, kind of changed the wording and truncation, but I kind of pulled the submission, and it kind of has more details, kind of a lot of what I just kind of had mentioned, and the details, I don't know if you can read that well, but basically it kind of responds to the questions in a different way in more detail, and ultimately kind of goes down the path of it was it failed for wind load. We over from March to probably end of June, kind of all different companies, all different quotes, a lot of time and different, costs. And, we even worked to change the pitch of the roof to bring it down. And all of that was kind of where we came up with the structure. It wasn't just, this wasn't an off the shelf. This is what was more or less from an engineering proposal. And it does encroach into the setbacks. I get that. And it's on the edge. We have from the height side, we have a neighbor that's basically right behind us. That's the second story. As you saw from the RU1, there's a duplex right behind us, and their balcony kind of overlooks our pool. So it's, in a sense, I think that the literal requirements sometimes may, cause some, undue, struggles there. Because I think that this would look much, much better than what we would have already proposed that was denied anyway. So it kind of was maybe a blessing in disguise. I'll kind of run a couple pieces here. This is just some models I kind of drew up, but you can see I just kind of drew a line and put them next to each other. The 20 by 12 was offset, so it kind of looked a little awkward. This is kind of what I was meaning. The 16 by 16 almost fits perfectly. You can't really tell that it's off a little bit, but it's still off a little bit, even with the 8 inches over or whatever the setback is. This is a little bit zoomed in more, sorry. The red lines are the actual setbacks, so you can see that it's right on the edge of it. And then the 20 by 12 does, but it also, you'll see in the next photo, it does look a little strange. So here's a couple of models of, current state. And another thing, which is, I'm not too proud of the front yard, so I know you saw it on there, but it's, we've been holding off on the irrigation and the sod and everything because we don't know where this thing is gonna go. So it's been a year of, mowing weeds. So we're hoping to get through that over the next, couple of weeks. But if you look here, this is 12 by 20. You can see it's right on the edge of the house. It's offset. And if you look on the bottom where the slab was supposed to be, it's just basically a tripping hazard because it goes around the other side as well. So it's just awkward. The 16 by 16, that's the one on the bottom. It looks much cleaner. It's nicer. It gives us a place, outside that we don't have currently. So we can enjoy the pool because right now we don't have a place for any cover. And the rest is, it's basically the email threads, so that's not that important. So you don't need to see that. So that's everything I have. I'm open to any questions, or that's kind of
Okay.
my proposal.
Any questions from the board?
From a design perspective, you mentioned it's not off the shelf. Like, we're not talking significant setback differences. Could you make it just slightly, 15 by 15 instead of 6 by 16?
Well, I say it's not off the shelf. It is, we'll say, a kit, but I was able to modify certain pieces of the roof to kind of bring the pitch down, and then, we'll say, I don't know if this is the right word, but harden it to make sure that it can withstand, floodplain and, the wind requirements. So it is off from a standard size. And it's a 16 by 16, which would fit, but it's 16 by 16, but the overhang kind of, pushes it through, beyond the setback encroachment, so.
Okay. I can see that you've tried different locations and to figure out what you could do differently, and I think it looks pretty good myself.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll add one other comment to that, because it's not obvious in here, but, we put the pool in, and if you looked at the pool, we were talking about this the other day, was if you looked at the pool was it was supposed to be lined up with the, I guess it would be the south side of the property, which would have given us the extra feet, but when they put it in and they get the permits approved, it's, we're new to the process. We didn't look at it in that way, and they built the pool, and, we're kind of stuck with what we got. That's not necessarily an excuse, but this is the best we could do with what we have, so.
Do you have dimensions that show where the pilings or where the foundation of the structure is going to be relative to the overhang?
Yes, I mean, the requirements, they might be within one of the packages, but for the 4 pillars, they recommended that whether the slab or the footers would be, I think, within, I want to say 6 inches. I have the dimensions, but, that's kind of what pushes it to that level. It's basically at the limit of where the footers would be required.
Okay, so is there a poured slab foundation?
Not yet.
But there will be?
Yes, yes.
So I guess my question is the setback concern at the level of the slab or the pillars or the overhang, or?
I'd have to look at it, but I think they were pretty close, because I don't know if the company or the engineering had the distance from the pillar. Obviously, you want it to be a certain amount, so it's steady, otherwise it just kind of fall apart. But whatever those distances were is kind of, I think, I'd have to look. I have the engineering. I had it with the model, I think, so it should show what the slab versus the overhang is what you're looking at,
Yeah.
right? What's that delta, or is it the same?
Right.
Yeah. So.
And I don't know if planning would know if there's a difference.
So with the patio, say you wanted just to put it in a patio, it would have a required 2-foot setback. So it's not necessarily the patio, it's the structure itself.
Structure itself.
Yeah, so we would look at the ISR, or impervious surface ratio, as well as the setback, but that wouldn't be the issue here. It is actually the structure.
Gotcha. And in this case, do you know what the overhang is then relative to the pillars?
Yes, I do. Not in this package, but I do have it, yes.
Is it more or less than 8 inches?
Oh, yeah. I think it's
More.
it's got to be more than 8 inches, I'd imagine. For that size structure, I would imagine it'd be, I don't know, at least 1.5 feet, maybe. Yeah. Oh, no, I think it was like 8 3/4, actually. It was like 8 3/4. Matter of fact, it's in one of these packages. Sorry.
We'll both look.
So Kristen, basically just the overhang is really the encroaching part of the structure.
There is an allowance for the eaves of, for a regular dwelling. Now, for an accessory structure, it most likely should meet that setback requirement. I think more on the staff side is that we had something that was conforming, that met the requirements, the applicant was aware, and then it morphed into needing that. So when we look at the criteria, the 4 criteria, can there be another option? well, that was justified. So there was one of those criteria that was not met based on that review, that previously he illustrated that it could. Now, due to other reasons, which is actually why I asked for the additional testimony to be on that, to be presented to you.
Aesthetically, it looks like it's, oh, sorry, go ahead, Denise.
We didn't receive any letters.
There was no letters received for or against, and I do have to mention, there was a mailing of, I believe, 443 associated with this. So I did get some calls just like, why am I getting this? And unfortunately, just because that parcel is, for the condos is so close, you can't just notify some, you have to notify all. So that was some fun mailing.
Yeah, it was, it's where they're pretty much, the condo complex is, when I look at Google Earth, it's 300 kind of grazes the property, and I guess that's,
Yeah.
and everybody gets one, so,
Yep,
Yeah.
they all got mail.
yeah.
Aesthetically, I think it's the way it should be. I don't
Yeah, thank you.
see that there's, that is a big encroachment myself. As far as expert communication, so I talked to one of the neighbors who is a friend of mine. Just want to let you know.
Appreciate that. Any other board members?
None.
None? None? Okay.
And I would like to say, since we're having comments, and that's the people that are directly, the Donovans next to you.
Yes, yeah.
And they were happy with it, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be the back fence, that's where they would be, so.
That's where the
Yep. The
thing would be
7
located.
foot would be 6'2", right? Yeah.
Right.
Thank-
Could we go back to that photo of the backyard with the two-story unit behind it?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll send it to you. No problem.
Okay.
That was Hurricane
single
recovery.
dwelling
so
homes?
That bad.
To the rear would be duplex.
A duplex, okay.
I did also want to mention, if I go back a little bit further, I apologize. I did do an overall aerial look of, this is not the greatest, but a pretty substantial look at the overall aerials, and anybody that has pools in the immediate area does not have patio covers. So I did look in to see if any other ones in the area, where they sat, if it was, looked to be a little off, but most do not contain patio covers,
Okay.
not associated with the dwelling, just to. Is
Does
there
the
any
board
other?
have any other questions?
No.
Okay.
Then-
Thank you.
Thank you.
If we have any questions, we'll call you back up.
Right on.
Are there anybody in the audience that would like to comment for or against this variance? No? Okay. Not seeing any, so we'll go to,
Close public comment and then go to board deliberation.
Actually, I make a comment, if that's okay still?
Yeah, you just have to be sworn in.
Do you, raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm that the information or factual representation that you are about to give or present to the board is truthful?
Yes. Daniel Rosenthal, I live on 3115 Maritana Drive. Just from one of those slides that you were showing, there were two different zones, and the zone that's on the left side of the picture that's sitting right here looks like it's different and maybe has different setbacks that are lower than the 15-foot ones that the RU1 had, and that if that were the case, that might be some consideration as well, because certainly from my perspective in hearing that you can have a, pre-constructed kit and missing by 10 inches is difficult. So,
I have a question for you. Were you referring to the rear, the duplex, basically?
yes.
Okay, that's what I
In
thought.
other words, the setback on that being, you're in an RU1 district, if you're surrounded by RU1 homes, all of those setbacks make sense, but if you have differing ones that are less restrictive, maybe that should be considered.
Thank you. Before we close the comments, is there anybody else that had a comment? Nope, so we'll close audience comments. and go to board discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think while the initial rendering passed, right, it didn't pass engineering, so that size fit, but that particular structure wouldn't work. And I think he's demonstrated, trying really hard to find something that would work for his use and comes darn close to meeting the restrictions from a setback perspective. So I'm inclined to say, without having any negative response from the neighbors, that I think this is a good use of him maximizing his property.
I agree. Any other comments?
No, I agree.
Okay.
Just to be clear for the motion, based on the staff report, whoever makes the motion will have to say, I move to approve this application. Based on the record, I feel like the criteria have been met, just to clarify.
Okay.
We could.
I move to approve case number 23062 based off the testimony heard today, having it met the criteria needed for approval.
Second.
Roll call?
Member Small?
Yes.
Member Chase?
Yes.
Member Lawson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Bumar?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, so next on the agenda, we have we were going to the item 5B, is that?
If I may just make one comment, I will be in touch for a development order for you, so there is a next step, but just hang tight with it. I know, I can see it in your eyes. So yes, I will be in touch with a development order for you, and I'll hammer out the next steps. Okay? Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I apologize.
No, oh, that's okay.
It's actually 5A. I think not last meeting because it was canceled due to the hurricane, but July 26th, Member Lawson requested a discussion regarding the variance process. So what Kristen put together was kind of information on the variance process, and then kind of how these things happen. And then along with that, on page 51 of the agenda is, I want to say like the last year.
This would be 2023 as of August 30th.
The applications that have been approved.
Correct.
And I think we mentioned, and we can let the discussion go where the board wants, but we did amend our code maybe 3 years ago, maybe 4, to include an administrative variance for like de minimis situations, which is obviously up to the staff depending on what the circumstances are, to try to limit, because if you remember at one point for you older board members, we were getting a lot of generators and things that were like 5 inches, 6 inches. So what we did was we were like, all right, how do we address this situation staff-wise? We amended the code to kind of bring the bigger ticket items to you all. So that's been done, but as a board, you can always suggest things, and we can always better the process.
So coming off this last case as a great example, like what was the determining factor to move
So
that
it's
from
actually
average
the sum of the inches. It can't exceed 12. So he was over that threshold. So that's where when Brandon at the first, or staff when he first reviewed it, it may have calculated out that way, or things may have changed. I don't know. But if the sum of the relief that you're asking for exceeds that 12-inch or 1 foot mark, then that would trigger you to the practical difficulty. So that is that threshold.
And I think what I was observing that prompted the question was just looking at people replacing outdated window air conditioners, which are noisy, this deep, with these new split units that are smaller, more efficient, and just generally a win-win. That seemed like something that we could save property owners the hassle and expense of going through a full hearing. And curious other scenarios that we might run into over time, learning then that actually these variances, the administrative variances, are coded into the LDC, so we'd really have to go back to the city commission to expand the scope of the administrative variance if we were to want to carve out other things.
Right.
Yeah,
And
we would.
I can say that it is not really time effective. It still takes the 6 weeks in order for the preliminary and the final. So some may say, well, I'll go for administrative, that's quicker. It honestly is not. It just does not require a board hearing.
Out of curiosity, does it require advertising?
It does, it is noticed to the property owners for 300 feet, and is, a sign is posted with the preliminary decision, final decision date, et cetera. So
And
they
there's
just
so
don't
much
get to
cost.
see
Is it the same
you.
cost?
I'm sorry, it's $250 plus the mailing fee. So it is half than what it would be, but again, depending, sometimes you would get an application like today that had 2 variances, it's all the same cost, or you may have one that has 7 that they're requesting. It is still all the same fee.
And I will say, I mean, to your point, Member Lawson, we have very minimal costs for variances in the city. I mean, normally they're a couple $1,000s plus advertisement costs. We're talking $500, and you can ask for 7 under one application. I think the thought behind this, because I was behind drafting the code, is you kind of want people to think ahead, right? Especially with the generators, because that's something that, okay, I just built my house and now I want a generator, and it's like, well, maybe you should start thinking about that so that you don't have to come in for a variance and you can fit it within your setback. So that was kind of some of the policy mindset behind doing what we did before.
And I can say, staff, if we have someone that's looking to build new, that is one of the first things I personally ask is, where are you putting the generator or your other equipment? Do you have a recess? Do you have a nook? Do you want to put it, like, I really try to drive that home, because it could be in that design process and absolutely fit, depending on how they design it, so.
Yep.
I have a question. If that patio cover would have been existing and it was 10 years old or whatever, they wanted to replace it, then they wouldn't, that would have been already grandfathered in? Is that?
Well, they could retain it, but if it's, partially destroyed or they want to remove and replace, then they have to come back into accordance with the land development code. And that's how over time we fix those things.
Right. Okay. I was just curious about that. Because you get to that 1 foot or 18 inches and it seems you could keep going and go, well, just a couple more inches, but I know there needs to be a setback line that you kind of have to stick to.
Right.
But if something happened to that structure because they've been approved with the variance, that they can go to that.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yes, that
They'll
would
always be able to build
that
it
runs
in the
with it.
same.
As we just
Correct.
approved.
And if they sell the property, a new owner, same.
Same.
It runs with the land.
Interesting. So would that go with pool equipment too? So for example, if you have existing pool equipment against the wall that's always been there, needs to be replaced, would then that have to be pulled off the, say, 3 feet with the replacement, or could you just replace the old equipment where it was?
It should come into accordance. Sometimes we've had, they've relocated it to around the back. So they should come into compliance at that point.
I can guarantee you we don't get applications on that. I mean, you can just assume a lot of people do a lot of things without asking permission, assuming that they can do it, so.
Right. And that is something staff is working with the building department as far as additional zoning reviews and things of that nature to try to just keep on top of it. With the decisions that I put in the packet, I just wanted to say there was like 18 applications that were there. We only had 1 for administrative. We currently have 1 pending as well, so it's not a lot that we get for admin variances. Currently, we do have 7 incomplete. 1 was withdrawn, and 2 are holding for additional information, and actually 2 on for October as well, just to give you kind of like a heads up. So
we have 3 in October so far?
2. 2 is scheduled, with the 1 we continued indefinitely. I'm not sure when that will be back. The owner asked for that to be continued, going back to the drawing board a bit, I think, due to some difficulties with the building department and the plans. So
is it appropriate to ask, since we're kind of going back to that one, if like the lady from the Don Cesar Neighborhood Association came, and obviously there's some issues with the neighborhood there, is that something that we need to discuss?
So in my legal opinion, and I do respect Betty, I mean, she comes to a lot of meetings, there's a radius requirement, which we meet, right? There's a sign posting, which we meet. I can't force people to come to the meeting, but are we notifying them? Yeah. I mean, you heard the second citizen state that he got a notice and just didn't show up. I mean, at that point, there's nothing we should do, I think, more. And to Kristen's point, and she can speak on this, when you're talking about the character of the neighborhood, it's a lot more than just looking around and saying, okay, this doesn't fit, right? There's more in analysis that goes into that.
Surely.
So,
Also, if there was such a tight-knit community, you'd think that the people that were notified with being in 300 feet would have reached out to all of their neighbors.
and that I could see that happening too.
So I have a question about mailings. So within 300 feet, so that's the front of a condominium complex, and there could be 8 buildings? Does everybody in the complex get it?
So it's, I don't make the mailing list, that comes from the Pinellas County Property Appraiser. I enter in the radius of that particular parcel, and so if when they create it, it kind of does that circle around. So if it bumps over, say, a foot or whatever, it will trigger the whole parcel, and not just, those individual condos or within that little sliver. It would,
Right.
the whole.
Gotcha.
And that's the advertising expense that the applicant covers.
Correct.
Support.
Yes, yeah.
But furthermore, it brings in everybody that are not even in that area. They're kind of they're not close to that really, in the condos, because I don't know how many condos are in that partial, but I think there's 5, 6, 7 buildings, and some of them are.
Correct, but they do have to get notified.
Yeah, I understand.
It is within the parcel, and the applicant and I did have that conversation. I said, believe me, I don't look forward to printing all these and stuffing them and mailing them and postmarking them, but it is part of the process.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
But that turned it from probably 20 to 300, or whatever the number was.
It was pricey, I will say.
Yeah.
But then again, it gives everybody that opportunity. It is a standard at that point.
Right.
To be notified, and you don't have to be within 300 feet, you can be any concerned resident.
Oh, absolutely.
Or person at that point, not even a resident. You can still make comment to it.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate staff's diligence in putting together the summary and the discussion with the assistant city attorney.
Slides.
It's fantastic. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Ryan.
it's up to the board.
Uh,
I mean, it's a discussion item. It's up to the board.
I don't mind.
Curious about
Can you
Come up to the podium, please.
name and address, please?
we're here just because we're wanting to learn the process, because we're going to be in front of you in some point in
I
the
get-
hopefully distant future. But
These may be ex parte communications.
Dan Rosenthal, 15 Maritana Drive. The gentleman here brought, I guess there was 2 different variances he was looking for, the side yard variance and the rear yard variance. And the question I have just generally is, and I heard the word administrative thing, which might be what I was talking about, but I built a dock at my house, and for part of it, I needed to get my neighbor's permission because it infringed on the setback. Once I got my neighbor's permission, nothing else was required. There was I didn't come to see you guys. Brandon and Bill Palmer and Barry approved it somehow, and it worked, and I got that done. So did I get a variance, or was that just permission that was required? And the question is, if I have a side yard variance that I want from 7 feet to 6 feet 2 inches, can I just get approval of that side yard neighbor, or is there still having to come to the process here for that?
And I don't know if Kristen feels comfortable, but what I would suggest is you reach out to the planning department.
I don't think that's anything that we can just say on the spot that here's the scenario. I think we would have to research our records and, confirm.
Is there a difference between the dock building and like in terms of the process? Is there a difference between a dock? So it's the same thing. So I got some sort of a variance.
I can't say that you did.
It is definitely possible, but I would recommend just reach out to us. We can go over it and research it and see which variance, if necessary, that you would be applying for.
And is this the same group? We have a property that's 2 lots. Our house is not FEMA compliant. We had problems with the last storm, so we're looking at what are we going to do? And we're looking at splitting the lots. And lo and behold, we're in RU2, and although each of our lots is over 6,000 feet, they are non-conforming shape. Is that something that would come here, or is that a different place that goes? I believe it goes to you. I spoke to Brandon about this about a week and a half ago,
Okay.
but
So there must be something with the layout that you may not meet, or a minimum width requirement, a frontage,
60 by
something.
100, but
Okay.
it's a pie shape.
It's quite possible, but again, that's something maybe
Okay.
we can address.
I'll find out. For you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, if we don't have any other discussion, we'll close the discussion
We
and...
do have one more.
Okay.
And you didn't see my slide.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought you were not going to show us.
No, I did. So I just actually had, as far as the decision so far, just so you could see it visually, and then the criteria that was in the land development code. That was not actually part of your packet. This was supplemental. But Jenny did have our draft dates, so we don't want to close until we
Yeah.
look at those.
Oh, the dates?
Item, yes.
Yeah, and I just want to, and obviously respectfully, because I've sat at this board for a while, don't just say okay if you guys already know of dates you're not going to be here, because we've only had a full board once this entire year. And just in all fairness to the applicant, especially with 3 members, you got to get all votes, and I think the more the merrier, although we don't need it for a quorum, so not that we need decisions now, unless you're willing to make. I just would really take a look, especially at the holidays coming up. If you already know you're going to be out December 20th, then maybe we should move that or not have one. We're just really trying to promote a full board as much as possible.
And I totally agree with that, which brings up, I don't know if we can open it up a little bit, but we'll have to have another discussion, I'm sure. But we've already had this discussion a little bit about having another person on the board that's a stand-in or alternate. Because I know some boards have an alternate, and we don't have an alternate.
I know of no boards at the city that have an alternate.
Oh, because it used to be, well, unless they changed it, the Future of the City, which was a board, had an alternate, I believe, because I was on that board for quite a long time.
So I guess there's Code of Ordinances boards, which is you and library and planning board and city commission and things like that. That could have been a citizen committee, which is a little bit
Oh, I bet
different.
it was. Well, it was appointed by the commissioners.
Interesting. I'm not
But,
part of that board.
so what you're saying is, we would need to have the commission make a change in the code
Correct.
to have an alternate?
Yeah, you would. And if they're going to do it for you, then they would probably do it for...
So is that something that you would lead in discussion with the commissioners and the other boards? Because it only makes sense to have an alternate, because it's obvious in the last, how many years that it's kind of been rare that we had 5.
Well, and I think from at least my position legally, just because I've handled private clients and variances, you always want a full board, right? But at the end of the day, that's why we're doing this now, right? If
Well, I understand, but
there's a meeting you can't meet, then but at the end, we meet, fourth Wednesday of every month for the last 20 years, so maybe don't have a doctor's appointment, or, things come up, and I get that. But that's what we're trying to, and an alternate member, anything's possible. I've only seen it once, and it's pursuant to statute for a code enforcement board. The statute allows you, and we have a special magistrate here, it's in another jurisdiction, to appoint 7 members and have 2 alternates. So I'd have to do some legal research to see, I'm sure it's possible, but it would have to be a commission decision, ordinance change, 2 advertising is kind of,
right.
not the easiest of changes.
Well, it seems to me that things have changed in the last 5 or 10 years, the way people plan and do their lives, and all of a sudden, people are taking off for a month or a couple weeks that they don't know about. You know what I mean? So,
Well,
that's
illness is the biggest one. We're minus a chair today.
right.
It's you can't prevent sickness, but if we knew ahead of time, and I think that he would have given us a week's notice on that one, and an alternate.
Illness comes up, and there's extenuating circumstances, someone has to pick up their kid. Life happens, right? This isn't like a full-time job in any aspect.
Right.
But the idea is let's communicate if we need to move it to the second Wednesday because that works better, or we need to just not have a meeting. I'd almost prefer that to occur than to have, no quorum or 3 members, just in all fairness of the applicant.
I think it's totally fair, and I think we can all, block your calendar, and the soonest we know we're not going to be something, we don't need to wait for Kristen's email to let her know, like, just communicate.
Yep.
Right. But for example, if it was in the holidays and 2 of us knew we were going to be out of town, if we had an alternate, that would make a big difference,
Well, maybe they'd be out of town too.
They could be.
Right?
That's right.
So like right now, we have November 29th. I can tell you that's the week after Thanksgiving, right? Any plans? I mean, should we, at least for this one, if you guys can speak on it, because we can focus on the next year.
I'm fine with these dates.
Okay.
I'm good.
And like December 20th, that's okay with everyone?
Christmas is at my house, so.
It's a good thing about being in Florida.
Yeah.
Winter holiday.
Everyone comes to visit.
August, maybe not, but
Yeah.
I'm good with these dates. School's
Okay.
still in session December 20th, so.
As far as I can tell, I am also.
Okay.
Perfect.
And then if you could just take the other one, we could always add it to, I think we usually do this in October,
It's going to be on the October.
on the October one, the one for next year.
Okay.
So you could just take it home with you and we can always have that discussion before we motion to approve. Ginny, do you need a motion on this one or is this just, they already approved the 2023, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Nothing further from me.
Okay. If we don't have any further discussion, we'll entertain a motion to dismiss.
Motion to adjourn today's meeting?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I-
All right, thank you. Meeting adjourned.